Why garden? What's the point? You can get everything cheaper and easier from the grocery store, comes a common refrain from non-gardeners, typically with a fair amount of judgment in their tone. We gardeners attempt answers, but there's a deeper pull to nurture our plants in the soil that many of us would have a hard time describing. If we tried, we'd start with the common comebacks. Store-bought produce just can't compare, we'd chime in. And it's true. There's not a single store-bought tomato with flavors to rival those fresh from the vine. Not even close. Let alone our fresh, heirloom gems that we've specifically chosen over the years to meet our exact idiosyncratic flavor requirements. Not a one. Not even close. And this would go for every piece in each of our gardens. The flavors just can't be beat. But there's much more to it than that for sure. If questioned further at this point, though, many of us would just move on to say, well, I enjoy it, flatly ending the conversation, not wanting our reasons probed deeper. We wouldn't likely argue the point, but we'd probably concede ease. It's certainly easier to walk into a grocery store and grab what's been done for us. But it's only easier if we compare just that isolated task. I mean, if we're only looking at the walking and grabbing, it's easier for most gardeners to walk 10 paces to their gardens and pluck a ripe tomato from a vine than to drive to the grocery store, park, walk in, grab the fruit, check out, walk out, drive home. But what about all the work it took getting it to that point? Someone would interject. What about all the work it took getting your store-bought tomato to that point? I would answer. And all the gas it took shipping it to you. And all the work you had to do to own a car and buy the gas, to get to that store and have the money to buy it. And what about a more long-term perspective, knowing that people with gardens eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, and people who eat more fresh fruits and vegetables are notably healthier? What about all of the societal and personal energy needed to later rectify the accumulated effects of lack of good nutrition? What if that's taken into account? And what about the same for exercise? So, is it easier? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know if I'd personally concede the point, and for good reason. We probably also wouldn't, but we could similarly argue that gardening is actually cheaper and have some merit, especially when we consider what we get for our money. Sure, a person can get things that look like and technically are fruits and vegetables from the grocery store, but they're really the Potemkin villages of fruits and vegetables, erected to look the part to cursory passers-by, but deeper inspection finds they taste more akin to the hydrated cardboard cutouts that are their true kin than any real homegrown versions of themselves. And this says nothing of the actual value of what most of us really grow. The year we moved in the middle of a growing season and didn't have fruits and vegetables hanging off of bushes and vines and waiting in the ground whenever we wanted them, and we saw, for example, we'd have to pay $10 a pound for the tastiest organic heirloom peppers we normally harvested by the bushel, let alone the rest needed for a single meal that would have cost at least $100 just for the produce. That's when I realized an even deeper truth to a statement I'd often made. We typically drastically underestimate the true value of our homegrown produce, because we can't compare it to the pablum we're offered at the grocery store. They don't even carry the unique and perfectly ripe heirloom organic gems we've sublimely chosen for our unique tastes. And if you can even find them at a farmer's market, they're expensive as fuck. I mean, support your farmer's market, but damn, it's cheaper to grow them yourself. But honestly, I think there's much more to it than ease or cost. Because even if we accepted the argument that store-bought produce is cheaper and easier, we wouldn't care. Cost and ease aren't our motivating factors, as evidenced by the fact that most of us will still garden even if it costs us much in treasure and time. Because there's a pull to nurture our own plants in the soil that runs much deeper. It's in our bones. We love the soil. We enjoy working in it, its smell and feel in our hands. In the spring, its aroma as it warms back to life is a harbinger of all good things to come that year. Just as its redolence after summer rain soothes our souls as our faces light and smiles unbidden. And our plants' growth and the garden's phases throughout the spring, summer, and fall help us mark the passing waypoints of yet another good year. Watching something grow that we have helped nurtured gives us a satisfaction beyond any words I can summon. Because the truth is, the best of it is beyond description. We can't summon words because there aren't any. But at least part of it is a satisfaction that comes from being able to grow our values and how it connects us to some of the best sides of our humanness. And these two run together. Just like cooking allows us to cook our values into our food, whether it's slow, organic, local food shared with family and friends, or conventionally grown industrial fast food scarfed down alone in the car, we cook our values into our food. Gardening allows us that same expression, and maybe more so. Because our deepest values are inherently baked into the process, when we grow our own food, we grow our values. And everyone's values are a little bit different, and that's okay. Some grow for taste. And whether we're a master chef, a gourmand, or someone who just appreciates a good meal, like I said, the flavors can't be beat. Some grow for healthy food. For some of us, this means not wanting ourselves or our children to be filled with or exposed to a bunch of chemicals. Others maybe just notice they feel better after eating homegrown fruits and vegetables. And many of us assume tastier, homegrown produce means healthier produce, which equates to greater health for those who eat them. And for good reason. Several groundbreaking studies, starting with one published by Donald Davis et al. At the University of Texas in 2004, have shown that conventionally grown, store-bought produce has lost significant amounts of its nutritional quality over the last 50 to 70 years, explaining why, when eating such food, we're often left feeling distended long before feeling sated. And even though there's no consistent evidence that organic produce is more nutritious, since it's grown in such a variety of ways, some of which do little to replenish the deeper soil health that actually leads to increased nutrition, and instead just mimic conventional production without the chemicals, we now know there's a vast difference in food quality and nutrition, depending on how food is grown. And imagine that. The healthiest food is grown in the healthiest soils. And it turns out, we can taste it. All the vitamins, minerals, bioflavonoids, carotenoids, and other compounds that make fruits and vegetables not only look appetizing but also taste great are precisely what also make them so nutritious. Whether it's cancer-fighting antioxidants or just the building blocks of healthy cells, tastier produce is actually better for us, and the tastier the better. So we've been right. The better they taste, the better they are for us. Some grow to contribute to the greater health of the world around them. We hear about algae blooms and dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico caused by overapplication of fertilizers and crashes in beneficial insect populations from the overapplication of pesticides. We hear about food miles and carbon footprints, and we hope we can do just a little bit better on our own plot of land. But the pull to garden stems from even more than all of this, even with how cool all of this already is. In sharing the acts and the bounty of gardening, we find deeper connection. It connects us to our family, past and present. It adds spice, depth, and reciprocity to our friendships, and it bonds us to our neighbors. As we practice methods passed down by family members, or find out we miraculously do things just like some ancestor we never met, learn from and exchange seeds and plants with gardening friends, and exchange produce and talk shop with gardening neighbors, we inevitably gain a sense of concrete connection that, for many of us, is enough by itself. But it also bears noting that gardening similarly connects us to all humans throughout time who have done the same thing. Maybe we, for example, use Buffalo Birdwoman's methods for planting corn, beans, and squash specifically because it connects us to those who have cared about gardening well on this earth for millennia before us, in the traditions they've thankfully long passed down. Maybe we do a version of it without even knowing it, just because it's so amazingly effective and absolutely beautiful, not even aware of how it got passed down. Either way, following thoughtful, reciprocating traditions like these honors the plants, the soil, the sun, the water, and the people who've passed these traditions down for generations and millennia. Whether we're fully conscious of their origins or not, we're connected to all of them. And at least on some level, we sense that we're a part of this lineage and tradition. Gardening also just feels right in ways we might not even fully realize. It's strange how we as humans can toil for decades in pursuits that continue to feel foreign, only to click into others in just a few days as if we'd done them for life. Many of us, for instance, fall into the routines of a wilderness trip our first time within hours, as if we'd always done them. And having tasted their joys, even in their hardships, we have a hard time going back to our regular lives and having them make sense in the same way again. And so we move mountains to return to the familiar joys of such trips, to click back into their routines almost instantly and connect once more to the best sides of our humanness. And of course we do. Roaming around with our micro band who all get it, all having freedom within, but also working together toward a few common goals of getting to where we're going safely, setting up some shelter, procuring water and firewood, and preparing some food together. Before we tell stories around the fire, are modern-day versions of what humans have done for the vast majority of our evolutionary history. Of course it feels right. Gardening is similar. It's one of those precious joys in life we can't click into like a part we're just made to fit. And I think that's for a reason. It's a great feeling when we've prepared a meal with our produce. It factors better when we've made it with only our produce. If we weren't hardwired to like that feeling of self-sufficiency, we wouldn't be here. And gardening allows us to take however big of a step back we choose to a time when we were able to meet all of our needs with our own hands. I notice a palpable unease in people without any ability to provide for themselves.
An unease whose depth only becomes truly apparent when those same people find the deep peace and satisfaction that comes from their increased self-reliance. The self-sufficiency part of gardening calls to us because it's who we are. We are made to want to produce or procure some, if not all, of what meets our daily needs. It's how we've always been as a species. It's simply who we are. The same hands that feel natural in the soil today have felt natural in the soil as farmers for 10,000 years and as hunter-gatherers for tens or hundreds of thousands of years before that. Our essays in our gardens harken back to our heritage as humans who have always provided for our own needs out of the bounty of this prodigal, prodigious earth. And as such, they connect us to this beautiful, bountiful home of ours, this earth, from which we inarguably take our daily breath and bread. We'd have a hard time explaining it, but I think we intuitively understand this connection. How could we not? It's inherent in growing our own food from the soil. It's staring at us each time we watch our plants grow, and each time we harvest their gifts, appearing as if from alchemy from sun, water, and soil. We can't but see our connection to all life on this planet when we work with the same soil, sun, and water that gives everything we can see breath and being. And in this connection, we settle into a deeply ineffable knowledge and find a new peace. A peace that, because of its sheer depth and ineffability, we can only hope to share with others through sharing the axe. In gardening, we also find our connection to all of the cycles of life and death, of which we're naturally a part and that only feel foreign and scary in their denial. By seeing these cycles in our gardens each year, we slowly come to grips with our place in them, seeing how we're also a part of that same giving and receiving circle of life. Somehow, after enough days of losing our thoughts staring into the faint light of evening in our gardens, another deeper peace bubbles up. And honestly, although we might not be able to ever describe that peace, it comforts us to see our place in what we've come to see as a beautiful cycle and a beautiful place in a concrete, simple way. And some of us eventually find that gardening gives us a way to not just do a little bit better on our own plot of land, but to also find ways to give back to the rest of existence that's given so much to us, further deepening our connection to all that is. By finding a way to grow for the flourishing of all, we find a depth of peace we thought was impossible to have until our flesh and bones became the soil that gives life to the progeny of all who've given life to us. In short, gardening gives us a concrete avenue to cut out the middleman and intuitively or consciously personally participate in the rest of existence that's so much bigger than ourselves, and happily lose our insanity-making focus on only ourselves by feeling properly small, if still precious as part of it, a place that is our birthright and has been for all time. It brings alive parts of ourselves we were simply born to become, parts that even though those severed from it hadn't known they'd lost, they could somehow feel the absence of, like a ghost stitch of a severed appendage. And finding them lets us know the other parts of ourselves that we can sense we're meant to have in our lives can be found as well. It gives us a little better of an idea about how to find them. All of this, the taste, the joys, are in our children's health, the health of ecosystems and the planet, growing our values, satisfaction, self-reliance, connectedness, even to all that is, peace of mind, is why I say gardening is, or at least connects us to, some of the best expressions of our humanness. It's part of our horticulture and hunter-gathering heritage that has been passed down in our cultures throughout the world, but also seared into the roots of our beings from tens of thousands of years spent in these acts. And it's one hell of a heritage, one of which we should be proud and thankful. So happy gardening, and may you always stay open to growing.
They have really no insect damage. We've put nothing on them.